Hello, and welcome to Jane's LME Addiction, a Cloud9Fin podcast where we talk about all things liability management. I'm your host, Jane Komsky, head of LMEs here at 9Fin, and with me today is Rachel Murray, a managing director at Moelis & Company who specializes in capital structure advisory. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jane.
Now, I'm going to make you sit through me touting your resume for a minute.
Oh, God. Okay.
It's impressive, and I think that our listeners will appreciate it, which is that you went to Harvard for undergrad, then you got a master's from USC, and then you got an MBA from Wharton, which is very impressive.
Thank you.
You probably could have done anything with your life, and yet you chose restructuring at Moelis specifically. How did you end up in this space?
I mean, who wouldn't want to work with restructuring professionals?
We are a lot of fun.
Clearly. So I came over to Moelis back in 2009. I had the opportunity to join when the firm was relatively young. I actually spent most of my time working for our COO originally, went to business school thinking I was going to do something very different. Ended up coming back into our banking side of the business. We started off as generalists and then moved into groups and got the exposure to our restructuring team, actually kind of on accident. I was working on Clear Channel and iHeart at the time. The company became more and more distressed, so got exposure to our restructuring team. I liked that the product was a mix of both finance, some legal and some game theory negotiation strategy. And so I thought it was kind of a way to be creative in a world that isn't always creative. And so that's really what drew me in initially. And of course, I like the people on the team, which is an important piece of any career you go into.
It's funny. It seems like everyone in this industry somehow falls into restructuring, that you don't, I guess, wake up as a child and say, I want to do bankruptcy and restructuring. But
I mean, I think that would be a tough ask.
Tough sell. Yeah. Over the years, I mean, the restructuring space has evolved a lot. And how has your practice changed and what you're doing and how you advise clients changed accordingly?
Sure. I think there's been a number of changes in the industry in general. I think just to touch on a few of them, because I'm not going to be able to cover them all right now. Probably first, there's been an increased focus on kind of out-of-court transactions. I think, with the cost of bankruptcy going up, the complexity of these cases these days, I think companies and either their owners or the creditors are trying to find solutions out of court. And so I think that's probably step, one of the items. I think another item is the perception of LMEs. I think historically, some of the transactions that occurred were viewed as very aggressive, and those have become more mainstream. So it's more approachable for companies to kind of go down this pathway. And then probably third is private credit. Not really an option or a smaller option for people a number of years ago. And that's really evolved. And it's been a way for flexible capital to really play in these situations.
When we look at the market today, it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty and is sort of reminiscent to the COVID era, where we were all very busy and clients were not sure about like how things were going to go going forward. How do you think, how was your experience sort of advising clients in COVID, and how does that compare to what's going on now?
Sure. I think, look, COVID compared to today, there's a lot of similarities between the two. Markets were kind of unprepared or kind of caught off guard. While there might have been some indicators, I think people didn't expect the magnitude. So it's been kind of a shock a little bit to the system. I think also the length of time. How long is this going to go? I remember sitting in April of 2020, people thought it was a 2-week thing, and it ended up being a lot longer time period. And I think now it's early days, so we don't know how long the recent changes will impact the market. But I think that's another one. And then third is industry-wise, right? There were some winners and losers back in COVID. And then I think there will be today too. What those exactly look like, I think it's probably still early days, but I think that's probably where there's similarities. On kind of the differences, I think, there was capital available, broad financial stimulus packages. There was low cost of capital opportunities for companies to kind of really make their way through COVID. I think there's still capital today. A lot of people with dry powder who are trying to put it to work, but the cost of capital is a lot higher than it was back then. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of shakes through the whole system. During COVID, you had a lot of companies who were facing operational challenges. And so they were really getting amendments or waivers to kind of bridge their way through what was viewed as, hopefully a short-term situation. I think today you're seeing more LMEs. I think you're seeing more kind of involved restructurings, whether that be 22s, even some 33s, 18s, which someone asked me earlier, 18s, being kind of a chapter 7 following your chapter 11. So we'll see what
This is actually the first time I've ever heard the phrase chapter 18.
I heard it the other day and I thought it was a pretty good one.
It's clever, yeah.
So I like that one. And then look, sectors impacted, like I said earlier, there were some winners and losers. I think back in COVID, you had travel, real estate, hospitality really being impacted, and retail. I think today, it's still, again, early days, but consumer and discretionary auto are definitely being impacted, and we'll see what other sectors get impacted going forward.
And so that brings us to the reason that we're here, which is LMEs and that general topic. And so, I mean, Moelis has been doing out-of-court restructurings for a long time, but LMEs seem to have only become popular, or at least the phrase, in the last maybe 5 years. And so what has the evolution of LMEs been like for you and Moelis?
So look, I think LMEs in general, like you said, has been around. I think what we call it has changed a little bit, or technology we like to use these days as LME technology. It's really, what we're trying to do is figure out what the company's objectives are and how do we solve that? And what kind of deal can you cut to address, or kind of transaction do you design to address those objectives? And using the flexibility that you've negotiated in the documents to achieve that. There's, transactions that have occurred historically, whether it's like a CERTA or a J. Crew, and those lead to kind of protections being put in place in the documents. But there's creative lawyers, creative bankers that always try to find other loopholes or other workarounds to try to create the transaction or solve the problem that they're trying to solve. So I think the core fundamentals of whether it's an exchange offer, whether it's putting new liquidity in, whether it's credit enhancements, whatever you're trying to solve for is still a core piece of it, and doing it out of court. I think the naming around it and kind of exactly how you implement has changed, but you're still trying to find a creative solution to a problem at the end of the day.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, I mean, people try to paint LMEs as either good or bad. It's sort of like this binary statement that you don't get in a lot of other areas. What would you say, taking a more nuanced view of it, what would you say makes for an effective LME, and what are the pitfalls of LMEs?
Sure. So there's a lot there. I'll try to break it down.
Yes, that's fair.
So look, I think every LME is going to be a little different because you're trying to solve a different problem, and companies have different objectives, whether it's trying to build some additional runway, so maturity extension, some need, cash flow or liquidity relief. So I think each one's a little bit different in what's defined as successful or good, just because every company or every situation has different factors at play. But I think the ones that are generally more successful, some of the characteristics of those would be ones where there's high participation. So you're kind of reducing your litigation risk. It's ones that are kind of setting up the company for longer term success. So there's some that have operational constraints put on the company, but if you constrain it too much, it can't do its day-to-day job. So trying to find a way through that. I think two other kind of aspects that are relevant for this would be making sure you avoid over complexity. Right now, a lot of the capital structures are becoming almost like spaghetti, right? Where there's all these complex interconnections between the various debt documents and layers.
Guarantees, first in, last out,
second lien, third lien.
Yes.
and trying to find it in a way that the company can have longer term success. And whether that's being able to refinance it down the road or just being able to operate is really important. And I think part of that is also being early and proactive. I think if you wait to the last minute, your options kind of narrow a lot that make it harder to find a solution that works.
Are there any specific tools that you think make for better LMEs or worse LMEs?
Tools.
Like co-ops, for example, are a creditor tool.
Sure. I think, look, on the co-op front, that's been a piece of the broader LME world that's become more and more relevant. On the co-op side, they have protections that they're trying to build in that are not in the docs today. So at times that really works well, right? It gives the company a counterparty to negotiate with. On the flip side, sometimes, it makes it a harder counterparty when there's a lot of stakeholders on the other side that each have their own objective that they're trying to solve for, and making sure that the company and the creditors kind of have a melding of the minds and finding a place where they're both of their goals and objectives can overlap. So I think on co-ops can be great, and they can also be a challenge. It's trying to find situations where both sides can get a win.
Yeah, like anything else, it's not good or bad, just
Correct.
Sometimes effective and sometimes not.
Exactly.
So, I mean, Moelis works on so many of these. Is there anything that specifically sets Moelis apart in their approach?
I think really what sets Moelis apart is our attempt to find creative solutions for our clients. At the end of the day, they have certain objectives they're trying to achieve, whether on the company side or the creditor side. But to just touch on the company side for a minute, our objective is to make sure that the company's set up for long-term success and also achieve high levels of participation. I think that's something that differentiates us as a group and as an institution, is really trying to find collaborative transactions that help the company out.
I'm going to end where I end with everyone who comes
Okay.
on and ask you, what's next in this space? What's happened? What's brought us to today? It's a very lengthy question, but basically, where are we and what's coming?
So I don't have a crystal ball, although I wish I did. But I think one trend or one thing that I've seen that I think will continue is a lot of companies during COVID use the capital markets to add debt to their balance sheet at a very low cost of capital, which was great for having them kind of survive the COVID time period. But their EBITDA or their EBITDA margins have not recovered to where they were kind of pre-COVID. And they're still continuing to face headwinds there. And so as these companies come up with, to their refinancing windows ahead of maturities, the kind of cost of capital that they can achieve in the markets is just way more expensive than it is today. And I think a lot of them are going to really struggle to support the debt load that they have. And that'll either lead to LMEs, in your honor, Jane.
Fingers crossed.
Or maybe some Chapter 11s. Hopefully more, being able to solve the problem and help them delever to a level that's more supportable for the business going forward and set them up for long-term success.
Great. Thank you so much again for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, always. And if you have any questions or comments, please email podcast@9fin.com. Thanks again for listening.